Although it would be ideal to believe our legal system is faultless, that is simply not the case. More often than anyone would like to admit, innocent people are sentenced to death for crimes they didn't commit. In other cases, people who were later found to be innocent have been convicted and sentenced to death. With that in mind, here is a list of the top 10 people found not guilty after getting executed. Starting from number 10, Larry Griffin. Quinton Moss, a Missouri drug dealer, was killed by Griffin in 1981. He was executed for the crime in 1995. Griffin had consistently maintained his innocence, and later it appeared that he was really telling the truth, according to the evidence. Despite initially supporting the claims during the trial, the first police officer on the scene now claims that the eyewitness account was false. Griffin wasn't at the scene that night, according to a different eyewitness who was hurt in the attack, but was never contacted by the prosecution during the trial. Number 9. Hoag Jild. In a public restroom inside a hot textile factory on April 9, 1996, Hoag Jild, then 18 years old, discovered the body and called the police. The body was a woman with the last name Yang. She was killed by being both raped and strangled. Within 48 hours, Hoag Jild was detained by the police, after whom they eventually coerced a confession. China was then engaged in a campaign to combat crime, and officials were required to crack a specific number of cases. The way the case was handled was affected by this. A firing squad carried out his execution in June of that same year, after he had been given the death penalty less than a month after the murder. Zhao Zhihong admitted to killing 10 people, including Yang, in his book The Petition of My Death 18 years later, in 2005. As a result, although executed, Hoag Jild was cleared. Number 8. Timothy Evans. The decision to abort their second child was made by Timothy Evans and Beryl Susanna Thorley due to their financial difficulties. They had a young daughter named Geraldine at the time, but on November 8, 1949, Beryl and Geraldine were strangled to death by Christie, a serial killer who had already killed several women. Evans was told by John Christie upon his return from work that his wife had passed away as a result of a botched abortion, and that an East Acton couple would be caring for his daughter. He suggested Evans depart from London for the time being. Timothy Evans admitted to accidentally killing his wife to the police in Merthyr Tydfil, Wales on November 30, 1949. Outside of their home, the body was dumped in a drain. Evans was questioned by police after they failed to locate the body in the drain. He was being honest this time. The police discovered Beryl and Geraldine's bodies in the washroom after conducting a thorough search of 10 Rillington Place. When Evans saw their clothing, he admitted that he was to blame for their demise. Christie's testimony that the couple would quarrel frequently was used in court along with this confession and the contradictory statements he had made earlier. Evans was given the death penalty after the jury found him guilty. Number 7. Jesse Tafero. Tafero was found guilty of murdering a state trooper in 1976. He and Sonia Jacobs were both given the death penalty for the crime. The testimony of another person who was involved in the crime, ex-convict Walter Rhodes, was the primary source of evidence used to convict them. Rhodes agreed to provide this testimony in exchange for a life sentence. Tafero died a violent death in 1990 due to a lack of evidence, the same evidence that allowed Tafero to be executed. His companion Jacobs was freed 2 years later. Number 6. Cameron Todd Willingham. Cameron Todd Willingham, aged 36, was executed on February 17, 2004. for killing his 3 daughters, 2 of whom were twins who were just a year old: Cameron Marie Willingham, Carmen Diane Willingham, and a 2-year-old Amber Louise Willingham. In order to receive a lesser sentence, the father had declined to enter a guilty plea. In order to kill his daughters, he purposefully started a fire, for which he was found guilty. The children were unwelcome, and Willingham wanted to get rid of them. according to the justification for the persecution. However, David Gran published an investigative report on the case in The New Yorker 5 years after his death sentence. His study suggested that the evidence for arson was insufficient due to advancements in fire science and fire investigator analysis. Number 5. Ruben Cantu.
By law standards, my case is barely legally sufficient.
Cantu was 17 years old when he was said to have committed the crime in question. After being found guilty of murder with the intent to kill, Cantu was put to death in 1993. Investigations conducted about 12 years after his death suggest that Cantu most likely wasn't the murderer. The sole eyewitness changed his story, and Cantu's co-defendant later acknowledged he had permitted his friend to be wrongly accused. Cantu, according to him, wasn't even present on the murderous night. Number 4 and number 3 are two brothers executed for the same crime, Thomas Griffin and Meeks Griffin. The oldest case on this list dates back to 1915. Two black men named the Griffin brothers were found guilty of killing a white man. They were found guilty because the brothers were implicated in the killing by Monk Stevenson, another black man suspected of carrying it out. He later acknowledged that the reason he held them responsible was that they were wealthy, and he had assumed they would have the resources to fight the charges. The Griffin brothers were executed despite being totally innocent. Number 2. David Wayne Spence. For the homicide of 3 teenagers in Texas, Spence was executed in 1997. He was allegedly hired by a clerk at a convenience store to murder someone else, but he mistakenly killed the wrong person. David Spence did not commit this crime, according to the supervising police lieutenant. Asserting that David Spence was innocent, the lead homicide detective said, in his opinion, "We were never able to find any proof that he was involved in the investigation." And finally, at number 1, Carlos De Luna. For stabbing a Texas convenience store clerk, De Luna received the death penalty in 1989. Nearly 20 years later, the Chicago Tribune found proof that suggests De Luna was probably innocent. The proof demonstrated that Carlos Hernandez, a man who even repeatedly confessed to the killing, was the one who actually committed the crime. So that's the end of the video. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and press the notification bell so you never miss out on our next videos. Until the next video, take care.